Welcome back to Forza Horizon 5, and today we are going to be fully building, I should say, a Lamborghini Centenario, and we're going to be taking it out to the highway and reaching the max possible speed that we can. So if that's something y'all are into, make sure you stick around for the rest of the video. Now, setting off in the Centenario for the very first time in Horizon 5 was a absolutely incredible feeling. Like, not only was it an incredible feeling to get my hands on this car, but driving it out of the festival for the very first time feels like, I know it's not necessarily like an achievement, but it feels like you've unlocked one when you drive out of the festival in this car. So before I built it, I wanted to go ahead and take it right here to the festival drag strip, engage launch control, and run it down the festival runway / drag strip in complete stock tune, complete stock form to see what kind of speed it could manage through the speed trap. Also, I gotta say, I did miss the screaming V12 sound of this car. Absolutely incredible sound. But now that we've gone ahead and run it down the festival runway in stock form, let's go ahead and get it back to the festival and get it fully built to see what it can really do. Now, you already know that right off the bat, the main thing in my mind is the pair of turbos that we're going to be strapping to this V12. Now, you know, we all know that V12s plus 2 turbos usually equals a lot of power, a lot of great sound, and a lot of fun, usually. And that fun usually translates into tons of speed on the highway. Now, without doing anything else to this particular engine, just solely strapping the turbos to it, that already gets us over 1,000 horsepower. Now, if you want to, you can put the racing V12 in this car, but I decided I wanted to leave the stock V12 in it and see what this thing could do when the original engine was turboed and fully built internally. So now it's time to go through and build the stock engine's internals. Now, I should say externals and internals, because the race intake isn't necessarily part of the internals. Now, race fuel system, race exhaust, everything is already basically sport level, so you're essentially just maxing out each part, race valves, race cams, to get that little bit of extra RPMs in the top end, which is going to be really helpful for us when we're running this thing down the highway. Race turbos are going to make a huge difference and are going to push us once again multiple hundreds of horsepower up from what we were before. Race intercooler system is also going to go on, and the race flywheel will complete our engine build. Now, in order to keep all of that power in check to some degree, we just got to make sure that our suspension is dialed in and good to go. I didn't put the drift suspension on it because that wasn't really the goal for this car, but it is nice to know that you can throw a drift suspension on your Lamborghini Centenario if that is really what you want to do. Full race weight reduction is installed, or I should say the elements that would equate to race weight reduction have been removed from the car. And I was going back and forth on the downforce, and later on down the line, I actually decided to throw the downforce kit on the car, but tune it mostly for speed. So essentially remove all of the resistance that would have been there, or drag that would have been there, from the downforce kit. And then I also wanted to make sure to fully build the drivetrain and not really leave anything left on the table in terms of the way the power would be transferred to the wheels. Now, when you're building a car for the purpose of speed, the transmission options really do present an interesting dilemma that we didn't really have before. So you obviously have your race 6-speed, but you also have a 7, an 8, a 9, and in some vehicles a 10. This one can run the 10-speed if you really want to. And so I was really back and forth on what I wanted to do. But I ended up making my decision to run the 10-speed transmission because I really wanted to see what kind of potential that would unlock in comparison to, say, if you were to build this car in Horizon 4. Now, diff-wise, I decided to go with the race diff. None of the other diffs really suited the purpose of what I was trying to build this car for, but once I got everything together, I decided to go ahead and install the setup, and it was a little pricey in terms of credits, but really not too bad in the grand scheme of things. And come to think of it, I've actually probably spent more money building, like, drift cars in this game versus building this top-speed focused twin-turbo V12 Lamborghini Centenario. So when you go back and forth on it, it's kind of an interesting detail. Now, this was the point at which I decided to actually throw the downforce kit back onto the car, and I was like, you know what? I can tune the downforce to be really whatever I want, as much or as little of it as I need, and that's why I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and leave it there in case I need to alter the tune of this car a little bit later on for some other purposes. Now, I didn't really know what to expect other than some craziness after I left the garage, and I've got to tell you, I was extremely impressed not only by the sound, but by the way it drove, because the second I pulled away from a stop, I realized the gearing was going to need a little bit of an adjustment because I was just smashing into the rev limiter constantly. So making my way down the festival drag strip, it didn't really take long at all to exceed the speed that I had set beforehand, and I ended up crossing the line around 197 miles an hour, and then I was like, you know what? First of all, why did I not shift up a couple of gears? And secondly, I need to retune this transmission, like, right now. So the first thing on order was a tune. Now at this stage, I didn't really mess with the individual gears themselves too much, but I instead decided to dial back the final drive a bunch because the standard final drive was really, really short, and while it works well for the stock power, it really doesn't contribute much to an additional, basically like throwing a ton of extra power at it. We basically threw an extra entire engine's worth of power at this car, and it didn't really respond all that well to it with the current transmission tuning. Now, I also backed off the downforce a whole bunch and brought it way back down to the speed side of things, and then closed everything off and made a run back down the runway. And I gotta tell you that with the new gearing, it was a lot more fun to drive, and it made a lot better use of the power. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not, but is there more that we could do to it to make it better? Oh, absolutely 100%. I mean, we were already crossing the tip of 220 miles an hour going through the little like drag strip start line there at the end of the runway. So, I mean, that's a big improvement from before. Now, I decided to actually go down this access road a little bit and then flip back around and use that as my start point for my run back down the runway. Now, I'm not quite sure why I drove into this ditch and drove over the edge and then across the road and then decided to come back, probably to get that particular board, but I was like, you know what? From that point on, this is where things are gonna get crazy. And it was also time to use launch control again. Now, launch control, I use it with manual with clutch, and basically what I do is I hold down the brake, hold down the gas, the revs will build and then fall, and then it will help you build boost, especially in a turbo car, to get that perfect launch right off the line. We were already over 180 miles an hour going through the start line, and then we ended up crossing the speed trap at 238 miles an hour. Now, in the grand scheme of things, yes, there are plenty of cars that have crossed it and plenty of players that have crossed it faster than that, but I was really happy with that number and decided that from here, it was time to move on to the highway. Now, on the way there, I really could not resist sliding the car around a bit because when you have all-wheel drive and this much power, you kind of want to see if you can do some unicorn-style maneuvers, and honestly, I was really surprised to find out that this car kind of can. Now, was it set up for drifting at all? Absolutely not. It was not in any way, shape, or form set up for drifting, and that's why it kind of surprised me as to how well it did. Now, it is obviously a very pushy setup with this particular configuration because it's not, you know, it wasn't built for drifting. It wasn't built to go sideways around corners, but I mean, again, I just wanted to see what would happen if I like ripped the e-brake and threw it sideways and gave it some gas, and it's actually not only really fun to slide around, but it's also really hilarious to see full-blown tire smoke coming off of all four tires when you have this much power going through an all-wheel drive system and you're full out sideways. Now, merging onto the highway, again, we were already doing about 200 miles an hour at this point, and this is where the game of how fast can you go in one direction versus another starts. And also, this is the section that begins the game of gearing. So when it comes down to who's going to be faster on the highway, usually 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the tune, not the way you have the car built. Because it's very easy to build a car all the way up to max spec, but getting that tune dialed in and getting it right is all about spending a bunch of time dialing in the specifics. Now, right now, I noticed I was like basically completely pegging the car out at about 271 to 272 miles an hour, and I knew it could do more than that. I mean, when I started to angle downhill just a little bit, it touched 273, but once again, I still figured that it could do more. Now, I'm sure there is going to be a way that you could tune this car even deeper than the level that we got to in this video, but as you'll see a little bit later on, we were able to get even higher than that 273 milestone. I also couldn't resist having another go at sliding the roundabout at the other end of the highway. I mean, can you blame me? Because I sure don't think so, because I feel like most of you would have probably done the same if presented with the opportunity. Now, drifting this thing around the roundabout, while it's a lot of fun to just turn tires into smoke, I was really trying to think about what I could do to increase that top speed on the way back. And as you can see, once we got back into the tuning, I started to get a little bit more in depth on the individual gears, as well as what I was doing with the final drive gearing. Now, I probably should have made clear that on my run back, I also reduced the aero all the way to speed, basically completely took away as much downforce as I could. But the only thing with that is that I know we weren't getting aero limited because the car was literally smashing into the rev limiter. It wouldn't have been smashing into the rev limiter if we were getting aero limited. So we were already able to push through all of the drag that the aero created. We just needed a longer final gear. And that is what I gave it, and I think on the way back, y'all will be pretty pleased with the results. Now, like I said before, I'm sure you could go a little bit more in depth with this tune, and I'm sure that you could probably squeeze maybe 1 or 2 additional miles an hour out of it, or maybe there's a secret to this car that I completely missed, and you could squeeze another 10 miles an hour out of it, but I really don't think so. It didn't feel like that to me. It felt like I was fairly close to the edge of the car, but without doing any, like, really tricky stuff, I figured that it was pretty much about where it was going to sit for top speed. Also, that bridge back there, I did not think that we were going to be able to get back onto the road one bit whatsoever. I thought we were for sure going to have to rewind, but then I decided to stick with it and stay in it, and lo and behold, it actually worked. So now we're up to 274, 275, 275 miles an hour, which is moving. It is absolutely flat out cooking. No matter what car you're in, no matter what section of the map you're in, 276 we were able to touch, and at that point, I didn't really know if it could go much faster than that. I'm sure some of you guys have gone 277, maybe 278, but 276 is my current max that I've been able to achieve in this car. And honestly, I definitely think that it's worth building one, and I also think you guys should get your hands on one as soon as you can. So hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys next time.